Mary had always been a bit eccentric, so when she showed up at the local pet groomer with what she claimed was a sheep, the groomer didn't think much of it. But when Mary unveiled her sheep, the groomer's eyes widened in shock. The groomer tried to hide his shock, but Mary could tell something was off. "Is everything okay?" she asked. The groomer stared at the sheep in disbelief. He inspected the animal from top to bottom without saying a word to Mary. "What's wrong?" she asked again. "There's something odd about this sheep and I can't quite place it," the groomer answered. "Let's shear its wool and see what's underneath." Mary, who was sure she had brought in a sheep, was stunned. What did the groomer see that she didn't? But she stayed quiet and watched. But what had Mary brought to the groomer? Why was the groomer so shocked? And what will she do with the animal now that she knows what it is? Mary had always loved animals, so when she came across a sheep that was in need, she didn't hesitate to help it. The sheep looked horrible with big matted wool and blisters on its feet. It was already evening when Mary found the sheep, so she couldn't go to the groomer straight away. She did, however, could help the sheep in other ways. She fed it hay and provided some water. After it had eaten, Mary clipped its hooves as they were overgrowing due to maltreatment. Next day, when she woke up the next morning, something was different. "Can you work with him?" Mary asked while looking at the sheep. She could see the strange look on her brother's face. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Where did you find this sheep, Mary?" "Just on the side of the road somewhere. Why?" "Well, there's something odd about it," the groomer said hesitantly. "Yeah, its wool is terribly overgrown and deeply matted. It can hardly see because it has grown over its face," Mary said. But that wasn't what her brother was talking about. The groomer started shearing and quickly figured out that it wasn't a sheep after all. It was a goat, and not just any goat. It was a wild mountain goat. 2 little horns hid inside the overgrown coat that gave the animal away. After grooming it, Mary returned it to where she found it and released it back into the wild. The end. Woman takes kitten to groomer. Groomer burst into tears after seeing it's not a kitten. A woman called Sarah brought a furry creature to a pet groomer. She told the groomer, called James, that it was a cat and needed to be groomed. James, not suspecting anything, took the creature and began to groom it. As he was cutting the creature's fur, he was shocked to discover that it was not a cat at all. The groomer turned pale and asked the woman, "Is this what I think it is?" As James brushed the cat's hair, he began to grow suspicious. There were some characteristics of this creature that didn't line up with the characteristics of a cat, but he pushed his thoughts aside and continued grooming, or at least he tried, because something caught his eye that he couldn't ignore. As he groomed the cat, the thought of it not being a cat grew more and more in the back of his mind. So the groomer decided to ask Sarah a few standard questions everyone with a cat should know. But when Sarah failed to answer the questions correctly, he knew something was up. The groomer asked her one final question: "Where did you find this creature?" But Sarah's answer shocked him. After walking this new route, Sarah came across a small cave hidden among the trees. It was a place she had never noticed before, and it seemed to call out to her with a sense of mystery and adventure. She simply had this odd feeling that she should check inside it, so she did. Without hesitation, Sarah made her way into the cave, her curiosity piqued by the unknown. She was just moments away when she encountered something very unusual. As Sarah made her way deeper into the cave, she began to feel a sense of unease wash over her. But despite her growing sense of dread, Sarah refused to turn back. As she pushed on, Sarah finally reached a large chamber at the cave's center. She was quite overwhelmed by the idea that this cave would be this big. When Sarah walked further, she suddenly stumbled upon this strange and peculiar-looking animal and was immediately intrigued. It was unlike any animal Sarah had ever seen, and she knew that she had to get a closer look. Despite the creature's creepy eyes, Sarah could see that it was friendly and harmless when getting closer, and she felt a sudden surge of affection for the animal. She knew that she had to help it, but how? It seemed like a harmless cat, but she wasn't sure of it and hoped she wasn't in danger here. As they began to question Sarah about the animal, they began to suspect it was something more than just a strange-looking cat. And after Sarah failed to answer some of their questions as they expected, they called the police, and before long, a team of officers arrived on the scene. The police were just as amazed by the creature as the groomers had been, and they quickly began to investigate. They ran tests and consulted with experts, trying to determine the animal's true identity. As she waited in the shop for the creature to be groomed, Sarah heard a loud noise and turned to see the creature escaping through an open window. She immediately realized that something was wrong and the creature was in danger. Determined to help the animal, Sarah set out to find it. Sarah hoped the police would assist her in the search, but when she approached the officers, they refused to provide any information or assistance. So, she returned to the only place the animal would return to. Sarah returned to the forest and searched for hours, following tracks and scanning the trees for any sign of the creature. As the sun began to set, Sarah started to lose hope, but just when she was about to turn back and go home, she heard a faint rustling in the bushes. Sarah's heart raced as she followed the movement, carefully making her way through the underbrush on her hands and knees. But when she finally saw the creature again, she couldn't believe her eyes. Sarah saw the creature huddled in a small clearing with a litter of newborn babies. She knew the police would probably find the animal and its babies, and she couldn't bear the thought of them being taken away or harmed. So, she made the difficult decision to take the creature and its babies back to her home where she could protect them. Sarah felt scared by the idea that she could be in trouble and maybe could be thrown into jail. The detective tried to intimidate Sarah, but she remained calm and refused to speak. She knew that she had the right to remain silent, and she wasn't going to say anything until she had legal representation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Sarah's lawyer arrived, and Sarah hoped that this interrogation horror would soon come to an end. With her lawyer by her side, Sarah explained the entire situation to the officers, and after a while had the perfect approach and said, "Let me do the talking." Then the lawyer called the police detectives back into the room. Police officers came back in, and the lawyer did all the talking. After a while, the police officers agreed with him and couldn't keep her in the police station. Sarah tried to explain that she only had the creature's best interest in mind and only wanted to help the creature. She really wanted to help them and don't let them end up being these experimental animals. "That's animal abuse," she said. Then the officers looked at her and said, "Okay, we'll tell you." However, first, she had to sign a secret contract that stated she wouldn't tell anyone about anything she would learn today. Sarah agreed to this condition, and the police detectives handed over the contract. The officers were about to tell Sarah everything when suddenly another officer came in and said that one of the little creatures was not doing well. The agents got up right away, and seeing that Sarah was allowed to know everything, she was allowed to follow the agents to the other room. As they were walking, the agent indicated that it was about an exceptional breed of cat that occurred in prehistoric mankind. That's why it was so special that it still existed, because they had been looking for it for decades. Once arrived at the room, Sarah finally saw the tiny creatures again. One of the officers said it was a false alarm, and luckily they were all doing well. They were all healthy, as was the adult mother. Sarah didn't really dare ask, but she did anyway. "Can I take them home?" In the end, Sarah was released and allowed to keep the creatures on the condition that she find new homes for them as soon as possible. She was grateful to be able to keep the animals that she loved so much, and she worked hard to find them all new homes where they would be well cared for and loved.